There's no going back on the increase in electricity tariff in the country. This is a position of the federal government, which was revealed by the Minister of Works, Power and Housing, Mr. Pt.2 Fashola, at the Senate public hearing today. The minister explained that the National Assembly has already empowered the National Electricity Regulatory Commission to fix tariff in the country. Our correspondent, Linda Kigbe, reports.
On February 16 this year, the Senate at plenary asked the Minister of Works, Power and Housing, the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission (NERC), as well as electricity distribution companies to immediately suspend the new electricity tariffs that have seen charges raised by over 40%. The Senate also directed its committee to hold a public hearing to get the views of stakeholders on the electricity tariff hike and how to move the sector forward.
Invited guests, gentlemen of the press.
This is a public hearing with government officials, labor unions and industry players in attendance. Officials from the labor unions in the electricity sector are voicing their displeasure at the increase in electricity tariff and notes that they were not consulted before the decision to increase tariff was made.
Now, they only gave instances of countries that tariff that are paying higher than Nigeria. I ask, what is the level of poverty in such countries compared to Nigeria? Nigeria is one of the worst countries with the highest level of poverty. Where you have the indices is 1 million people to 1,000 megawatts all over the world. That's the global practice. Now you have 170 million Nigerians battling for 2,000, 3,000 megawatts.
The Minister of Power insists that the increase in electricity tariffs is unavoidable if the country must enjoy steady power supply.
Of course, when I resumed as minister and I was told that there was going to be a tariff increase, I was the first person to say it would not happen. That was my first reaction. And the immediate past chairman of NERC said that the only thing he would advise me to do was to listen to the discourse. And some of those issues have been referred to here. And the discourse we are making it very clear to us that if we did not give them a market-reflective tariff, it meant that government would have to carry a continuing cost that accumulated to in the region of about 1 trillion naira.
But lawmakers insist that the federal government needs to urgently address some critical problems in the power sector. Although government is insisting that it is not insensitive to the plight of Nigerians, the hike in electricity tariff without a reciprocal increase in electricity supply in many areas in the country is a bitter pill for many Nigerians to swallow.
The federal government has reaffirmed its commitment to fight against corruption with a vow to investigate, arrest and prosecute anyone who dips his hand into state coffers to enrich himself. At a forum of the Nigerian Bar Association in Abuja, Secretary of the Presidential Committee on Anti-Corruption, Professor Bolaji Owosonoye, said 21 of the 36 states are technically insolvent, largely due to corruption. He warned those who take delight in shielding corrupt persons to retrace their steps, as the federal government's fight against corruption will not spare anyone.
It is a review of 1 year of democracy under President Muhammadu Buhari, as legal experts and security agents converged on Abuja to brainstorm on the state of the nation. The Secretary of the Presidential Committee on Anti-Corruption blames the current problem of the country on massive corruption.
Buhari's surgical procedures have however so far been resisted by a vocal minority of native doctors, sometimes suggesting somewhat hypocritically to themselves that the patient is not ill, and that if ill, the sickness is not terminal, not life-threatening.
The chairman of the MBA Committee on the Administration of Justice advocates the need for speedy trial of criminal cases, just as a member of the House of Representatives announced plans by the legislature to amend the EFCC and ICPC Act.
It must be a source of concern to the federal government that the successes achieved by the Nigerian military in its fight against Boko Haram has not been matched by the effective prosecution of arrested insurgents.
Right now we are amending the EFCC Act We are also amending the Police Act because we feel we need to do that in order to empower those agencies and those institutions to do things right.
The president of the Nigeria Bar Association advises the federal government to take steps to arrest issues of security and the economy. The civil society activist who berates the government on its handling of the agitations from the South-South and the South-East shares this opinion.
We believe that for any nation to grow, certain things must be in place. So those are the factors we are going to look at. Rule of law, which is very important. Without rule of law, every other thing pales into insignificance.
We can as well project that going forward, things may not necessarily improve unless we take certain critical steps.
The one-day event, which aims at reviewing 1 year of democracy under President Muhammadu Buhari, is focusing on the rule of law, economic growth, security, and the war against corruption.
Let's take it out to Abuja, where Linda Kiwe is standing by with more on the news at 10. Hi, Linda.
Hello, Amarachi. Good to see you and welcome to Abuja, the nation's capital. The House of Representatives has considered and passed an amendment to the Code of Conduct Bureau and Tribunal Act. The law makes it mandatory for the Bureau to ensure that anyone who is deemed to have breached the provision of the Act is given the chance to explain before such a case is referred to the tribunal. Section 4, subsection 2 was also amended to substitute the word President with the National Assembly as a one to appoint members of staff of the Bureau and exercise disciplinary control over them. The Senate has suspended the planned amendments to the CCB and CCT Act due to the outcry of civil society organizations. The Deputy Senate President, Ike Ekweremadu, had stated that the amendment had nothing to do with the ongoing trial of the Senate President Bukola Saraki at the CCT. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has commenced an investigative hearing into the land swap scheme of the Federal Capital Territory Administration. The investigation, which is being conducted by the House Committee on the Federal Capital Territory, is to address allegations of malpractices associated with the land swap deals in the FCT. Our correspondent, Larry Lasisi, reports.
It's the first day of a 5-day investigative hearing into the land swap scheme of the Federal Capital Territory. Present at the event is the former Minister of the FCT, the present Minister of the FCT, officials of the Federal Capital Territory Administration, and investors. The Deputy Speaker of the House, declaring the event open, made clear the focus of the hearing.
This public hearing is therefore to determine whether all that was said to be done to attain the development of infrastructure in the district given out pursuant to the land swap policy was done appropriately.
The former minister started by explaining what the government set out to achieve with the scheme.
The land swap project, in a summary, is just a new initiative, a new innovation in the need to develop FCT and also reduce the infrastructure and service gaps, incentivizing on the private capital to provide money to the tune of almost 1 trillion naira.
The first investor to speak outlined some of their challenges.
AICL has continuously sought to identify credible investors with whom to carry out a joint collaboration on the project. We have experienced delays in negotiations as some of the road infrastructure necessary to access the general area is still being provided. As such, Abuja Investments Limited is yet to implement the land swap scheme.
Members of the committee were not comfortable with this position.
So count from February 2013 to April 2016. That's 3 years down the line. You are still looking for investors.
You will give us a copy of the letter that they wrote to you, engaging you to participate, and show us that you paid as at when due, signed as at when due, or thereabout. If not, you are tying down government land.
The former FCT minister then gave this clarification.
I don't want the media to go out with the impression that we have engaged them. We have not engaged them. So there is no point asking all these questions, because in the first place, our guidelines, our template has not been complied by them, so we didn't engage them.
Over the next 4 days, the committee will be hearing from other investors and agencies involved in the scheme before it prepares its report on the matter. Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Through their votes, Nigerians endorsed the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, which came with the slogan of change. Tonight, in continuation of our review of 1 year of President Buhari's government, we examine how the education sector has fared within this period. The educational sector in the last 1 year under President Muhammadu Buhari has witnessed some relative peace as the perennial strike action by academic and non-academic staff unions of educational institutions abated. But the sector almost experienced crisis with the sacking of 13 vice-chancellors of federal universities, which attracted protest by the National Association of Nigerian Students. The federal government, however, clarified the issue, saying the vice-chancellors were illegally appointed.
The appointments predated the law, so it couldn't have been because of the law that they're in existence.
While the controversy of the sacked vice-chancellors raged, the executive secretary of the National Universities Commission, Professor Julius Okogie, who licensed 2 more universities in Edo and Imo states, advocated the need for the establishment of more universities in the country to address the tertiary education needs of Nigerians.
So when I hear people ask, why more universities in this country, and I ask, we don't have enough access.
Leading a delegation of government officials from Edo State, Governor Adams Oshomole welcomes the establishment of more universities, while his Imo State counterpart calls for the restructuring of university education to make it more practical for Nigerian graduates to be self-employed.
The future of our country lies in the quality of our human capital.
I also want to remind all of us that to get it right in this nation, we must get our education right.
Beyond the establishment of tertiary institutions, the federal government announced plans to restore sanity in primary education.
We need to totally go back to the drawing board to see what we are doing at the basic level of education in this country.
1 year after this announcement, and with the promise to employ 500,000 teachers, has the government lived up to expectations? Here is what some Nigerians have to say.
My sister was sharing experience to me last week when she went for teaching practice. She's in practice. So she said in a class where she is primary 2 in Yanya at phase 2, the 200 students are in the class.
It's not what we expect to see.
Some other Nigerians also speak on the expectations from the federal government.
We want to talk about Nigeria and Mr. President education. I would say I've not seen anything yet.
With what we have seen so far, it looks like they are trying to put 1 or 2 things together.
In 2015, the sum of 492 billion naira was appropriated for education. However, 2016 saw a decline with a sum of 369 billion naira appropriated for education. Experts continue to lament what they term a poor funding of Nigeria's education sector.